I'm Ella, knee-deep in the world of fashion and celebs, juggling brushes and eyeshadow palettes like a pro. My life's a whirlwind of glitz, but underneath the foundation and the flash, I'm just a girl who stumbled into love when I least expected it. It was one of those rare nights off. I almost skipped the bash at Jenna's, thinking about crashing on my couch with some takeout. But fate had other plans. That's where I met Daniel. He was no movie star, but man, did he have that charm. First thing he said to me? "Wow, do they serve drinks here, or do I gotta flirt with you to get one?" I laughed, despite myself. Try flirting, see where it gets you. And flirt we did, the whole night. Between the laughs and the banter, I felt like I'd known him forever. He wasn't in the biz, worked some tech job, but that night, none of it mattered. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and bam, we're hitched. The wedding was something out of a movie, thanks to my connections and his charm. Then came the house, a gift from my folks. "It's too much," I told them. "Nothing's too much for our little girl," my dad said, his arm around Mom, both of them beaming. Daniel was over the moon about the place. "Babe, this house, it's unreal. Look at that garden. And the terrace? Can't wait to chill there with a beer at sunset." The first few months flew by in a blur of happiness. Mornings on the terrace, evenings tangled up on the couch, it was like living in a dream. "I could get used to this," Daniel whispered one night, kissing my forehead. "Better not get too used to it. Remember, we gotta pay the bills too," I joked, nudging him playfully. "With you, babe, I'd live in a cardboard box. But this," he gestured around at our lavish living room, "this is a nice bonus." Our conversations were simple, filled with plans for the weekend, teasing each other, or deciding what masterpiece we'd attempt to cook up for dinner. "You know, I could get used to your terrible cooking," Daniel would say, dodging the dish towel I threw at him. "Terrible? You were begging for seconds last night," I'd retort, trying to keep a straight face. It was real, it was us. No pretense, no filters. Just Ella and Daniel against the world. Or so I thought. Life was rolling smooth until it wasn't. Daniel started missing dinners, his side of the bed cold when I'd crash late at night. "Work's a beast, babe," he'd text, the same excuse on repeat. One evening, I waited up, the clock ticking past midnight. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking like a mess. "Work again?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Yeah, you know how it is," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "No, I don't, Daniel. My friends get off work at decent hours. What's so special about yours?" He shrugged, a tired smile not reaching his eyes. "Just projects, babe. Big ones." I let it slide, not wanting to start a fight. But the seed of doubt? It was planted, watered by whispers and late nights. Then came the bomb. Jenna, always the gossip queen, cornered me at the gym. "Ella, girl, you didn't hear it from me, but Daniel's been cozying up to someone." I laughed it off. "Yeah, right. Daniel? He can't even flirt without tripping over his words." "Suit yourself. Just saying, eyes open." The words gnawed at me, festering into a confrontation one night. "So, who's she?" I spat, my patience worn thin. Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. "Who's who? What the hell, Ella? Don't play dumb. You're screwing around, aren't you?" His face turned red, anger and something else, guilt, flashing in his eyes. "I'm busting my ass at work for us, and this is what I get. Accusations? We both know you're lying. Just admit it." He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been working late. No affair, no mystery woman. Just work." I wanted to believe him, God, I did. But the lies were there, hidden behind late returns and missed calls. We yelled, threw accusations like grenades, our love caught in the crossfire. "Maybe we rushed into this," I shouted, tears blurring my vision. "Maybe we did," he shot back, his voice cold. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Thoughts of divorce danced in my head, a bitter end to a sweet start. But love, it's a stubborn thing. We sought help, clutching at straws, desperate to save what was left. A family psychologist, Dr. Lisa, became our referee, calling out fouls and starting plays. "Why are you two here?" she asked, notepad ready. "We're fighting. A lot," I started, my voice small. Daniel chimed in. "I work late, and she thinks I'm having an affair." Dr. Lisa looked between us. "Is that all?" We nodded, the room heavy with unsaid words. "Okay, let's unpack this. Ella, why do you feel he's cheating?" "Because he's never home. And when he is, it's like he's not really here." "And Daniel, your side?" "I'm trying to provide for us." But she doesn't see that. She only sees what she wants. The sessions were tough, each word a step through a minefield. But slowly, we started finding our way back to each other, learning to trust, to talk. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "Think we can make it?" I asked one night, our hands tentatively linked. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Yeah, babe. We're gonna make it." We were battered, maybe a little broken, but together. And at that moment, it felt like enough. After all the turmoil and heartache, I started believing that maybe, just maybe, a baby could bridge the gap between Daniel and me. It was a desperate thought, but hope has a way of blooming in desperate soil. However, getting pregnant turned out to be a journey of its own. Turns out, I had some issues on my end, a kind of cruel irony, given our situation. It took 6 long, grueling years of trying, hoping, and countless doctor's visits before I finally saw those 2 pink lines. I was over the moon, filled with a happiness so intense it was almost terrifying. This baby, our baby, was a symbol of hope, a testament to perseverance. I couldn't wait to tell Daniel, imagining his joy mirroring mine. But when I shared the news, his reaction was like a splash of cold water on my face. "Oh, that's great," he said, his voice flat, his smile forced. It was as if I'd told him the weather forecast, not that we were going to be parents. I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Great? You don't seem excited," I accused, feeling my own excitement dim. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I am, Ella. It's just a lot to take in, you know? I mean, a kid? We're going to be parents?" "Yeah, I know. It's scary, but it's also amazing, isn't it?" I tried to find the enthusiasm in his eyes, but found none. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, amazing." The conversation felt like hitting a brick wall. I'd imagined this moment differently in my head. Dreamed of it, even. But reality has a funny way of knocking you down a peg or two. Despite the awkward start, I clung to the hope that a baby would bring us even closer, seal the cracks that had formed in our marriage. "We need to think about the future, Daniel. For our baby," I said, hoping to ignite some spark of excitement in him. He agreed, though his enthusiasm felt as forced as his smile. "Of course. We'll figure it out. We always do." As the weeks passed, my belly grew, but the distance between us remained. Daniel tried, I could see that. He'd come home earlier, ask about my appointments, and even painted the nursery without complaint. But something was off. It was like he was going through the motions, doing what he thought was expected of him, not what he wanted. And then our miracle was born, and I was not up to it. Life with a newborn should have been about diaper changes, midnight feedings, and those quiet moments of wonder watching your baby sleep. Instead, it felt like I was living with a ghost. The whole cycle started again, like a bad rerun of a show you hated but couldn't stop watching. Daniel turned back into the man I feared would reappear. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. First once a week, then almost every day. "Work's crazy, babe. You know how it is," he'd say, his voice a rehearsed tape I'd played too many times in my head. One night, as I rocked our son to sleep, I heard the front door creak open. It was late, way past when normal people finish work. I waited for Daniel to come upstairs, to sneak a peek at his sleeping son or even attempt a whispered apology for missing yet another bedtime. But there was nothing. Just the soft snuffle of our baby and the distant sound of the TV flicking on downstairs. I couldn't stand it. Wrapping our son a little tighter in his blanket, I made my way downstairs, ready for a confrontation. I found Daniel sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some late-night show. "Really, Daniel? Another late night? This is becoming a habit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to wake the baby. He glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. "What do you want me to say, Ella? That I'm out partying? I'm working, for God's sake." "Working? Or avoiding us?" The words spilled out, bitter and sharp. Daniel stood up, his expression hard. "You think I don't want to be here? With my son?" There was a challenge in his voice, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore, Daniel. You're never here. And when you are, you're not really with us." My voice broke, a mix of anger and desperation. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying, Ella. You think I don't know I'm screwing up? But what do you want from me?" "I want you to be a father, to be present. Not just a guest in your own home." I was shouting now, the frustration of the past weeks, months, boiling over. Daniel looked away, the fight going out of him. "I'm sorry. I'll try harder, I promise." Promises. We'd had plenty of those. Yet, as I looked into his face, searching for something, anything, to cling to, I realized I wanted to believe him. For our son, for us, I had to believe him. "Okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "But we can't keep going like this. We need to make some changes." 2 more months have passed, and Daniel's work has not gone away. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. One night, I couldn't stand the silence, the doubt eating away at me. I confronted him, my voice laced with a tiredness that went beyond sleepless nights with a newborn. "Are you seeing someone else, Daniel?" His reaction was swift, a mix of anger and indignation that felt too rehearsed. "What? No. How can you even say that? I'm working my ass off for this family." His denial was strong, his gaze steady, but so was the pit in my stomach, growing with every word he said. I wanted to believe him, to wipe the slate clean and start fresh, but history and intuition screamed a warning I couldn't ignore. I nodded, a brittle smile plastered on my face. "Okay, I believe you." The words tasted like ash. I was lying to him, to myself. Pretending to trust when every fiber of my being screamed that I was being played for a fool, again. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, except for a message that popped up on my social media. A message from a woman I didn't know, claiming she was Daniel's lover. My first reaction was disbelief, a cold laugh escaping me as I thought, this has to be some sick joke. But curiosity, that gnawing worm, drove me to her profile, and that's when the floor fell out from under me. Pictures of her and Daniel, looking cozy and way too familiar, smiles that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And the kids, 3 little faces that bore an unsettling resemblance to the man I called my husband. My heart wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. I didn't confront him over the phone or blast him with angry texts. No, I waited. I waited with a storm brewing inside me, the photos burning a hole through my phone. When he walked through the door that night, the air was thick with my rage, a silent tension that made him pause. "Ella? What's wrong?" Daniel asked, already on edge as he saw the look on my face. Without a word, I slid my phone across the table to him, the photos displayed like evidence at a crime scene. His face went white, his eyes flicking between the screen and me, searching for an explanation where there was none. Ella, I can explain," he started, the words choking in his throat as he tried to piece together a defense out of lies. "Explain? Explain what, Daniel? How you have another family. How you lied to us every day. My voice was sharp, a blade honed by betrayal. He attempted to touch the phone, perhaps to delete the evidence or simply out of a reflex to hide his guilt. It's not like that. It's complicated. Complicated? I laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. I think it's pretty simple. You cheated. You lied. You led a double life at the expense of our family. What's complicated about that? Daniel's face was a mask of desperation, the reality of his choices finally hitting him. Ella, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. Fix this? How, Daniel? By pretending those kids don't exist? By erasing what you did? The absurdity of it all fueled my anger. I don't know. But I want to make things right. His voice was barely a whisper, a plea for a mercy he didn't deserve. Right? There's no right here, Daniel. Only wrong. And you chose that path, not me. My voice was steady now, the decision clear in my heart. He opened his mouth to say something else, maybe another excuse or a promise he couldn't keep, but I was done. I want you out, Daniel. Out of this house. Out of our lives. The resignation in his eyes told me he knew it was over. He packed a bag, his movements slow, like he was still processing the end of everything we had. As he stood at the door, a pathetic figure clutching a duffel bag of lies, he looked back at me. Ella, just go. My interruption was final, the closing of a book I never wanted to read again. And with that, he left, the silence of the house a heavy blanket around me. It was over, the end of a chapter one never saw coming. But in that moment, I knew it was just the beginning of something else for me. A few days later, there was a pounding at the door, so fierce it made me jump. I barely had time to react before she barged in, the woman from the photos, with Daniel cowering behind her like a child caught stealing candy. She wasted no time, strutting through my home like she owned the place, eyeing every room with a calculating gaze. Daniel wouldn't meet my eye, his shame a tangible thing that filled the room even more than his mistress's arrogance. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes cold. You need to leave. Take your kid and go. A tiny apartment should be enough for the two of you. I stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside me. Excuse me? She crossed her arms, smirking. You heard me. I have 3 kids with him. We need this house more than you do. I glanced at Daniel, expecting him to say something, anything. But he remained silent, a spectator in his own life's destruction. And you'll be leaving by next week, she added, as if announcing a change in the weather, not uprooting my entire life. As they left, Daniel not daring to say a word, the absurdity and audacity of the situation sank in. The woman who helped break my marriage now wanted to take my home, too. It was surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. A week had dragged by, and as promised, the doorbell rang with an urgency that only someone deluded enough to think they owned the place would have. Opening the door, I found them, the unlikely duo, Daniel's mistress, oozing false confidence, and Daniel, looking like a man who'd lost at his own game. You're still here? The mistress spat out, her eyes darting around, taking in the unchanged scene within. Why wouldn't I be? It's my house. I shot back, leaning against the doorway, finding strength in my stance. Her eyes flickered to Daniel, seeking some kind of affirmation. He, with a shrug that carried the weight of his lies, managed to mumble. We bought this house together after the wedding. It's as much mine as it is yours. I couldn't help but laugh. It was either that or scream. Bought? My parents gifted this house to me. Your name's nowhere on it. It's mine, always has been. The shock on his face was almost comical. The mistress, too, looked as if I'd slapped her with the truth. But, the house? No buts. It's mine. And him. I gestured towards Daniel with a disdainful flick of my wrist. Thinking he could lay claim to it is laughable. She tried a different tactic then, her pride bruised, but not beaten. Well, you may have the house, but I have him. A rich man with a hefty salary. I burst out laughing. The absurdity of the situation demanded it. Rich? Hefty salary? He's been playing you. He's a clerk, always has been. There's no welfare. She turned to Daniel, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. Is this true? Daniel, the color draining from his face, nodded, his earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. I might have exaggerated a bit about my job. A bit? The fury in her voice was a clear warning signal. She turned her wrath towards me, as if I were the one who'd lied to her. Without another word, she stormed off, Daniel trailing behind her like a lost puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 weeks after I kicked Daniel out and stood my ground against his mistress's absurd claim to my house, I took the next logical step. I filed for divorce. It was time to officially sever the ties that bound me to a man who'd become a stranger, a source of betrayal and pain. I wanted freedom, a clean slate for me and my son. Just when I thought I could catch a breath, she was back on my doorstep, the mistress, her desperation palpable, 3 kids in tow looking every bit as miserable as she was. Please, she started, her eyes brimming with tears. You have to help us. We have nowhere to go. This house, it's all they have. I stared at her, incredulous. Was she serious? After everything, she had the gall to show up here, demanding my home? The audacity, I muttered under my breath. Listen, and listen good. This house is mine. You and Daniel made your bed. Now, lie in it. Somewhere else. Her tears quickly evaporated, replaced by a scorching anger. How can you be so heartless? Look at them. She pushed the kids forward, their tears starting on cue. I sighed, my heart heavy for the kids, but my resolve steel. This isn't my doing. It's yours. It's his. You need to leave. Now. When she didn't budge, just stood there screaming accusations and curses, I had no choice. I called the police. The situation was beyond ridiculous, beyond sad. It was a circus, and I was done being a spectator. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence a relief. They tried to reason with her, but she was beyond reason, her tirade against me escalating. Eventually, they escorted her and the children away. The sight of them being led from my doorstep was both a relief and a pang in my heart. Those kids deserved better. Just when I thought I had started to turn the page, Daniel showed up again, knocking on my door with a look that was half regret, half desperation. I opened the door, not surprised, but disappointed to see him standing there, a bag in his hand, his eyes pleading. Ella, I messed up. I know that. But I've left her, left all that behind. I want to come back, for you, for our son. Can you forgive me? His voice was shaky, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. After everything, he thought he could just waltz back in? Forgive you? My voice was low, laced with venom. After you lied, cheated, and broke our family? You think you can just drop them and everything's fine? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make things right. Make things right? I laughed, harsh and cold. You're beyond making things right, Daniel. You made your choice. Now, live with it. His face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Ella, please. No. It's too late for pleases and sorries. You need to leave. Now. My voice was firm, brooking no argument. He looked at me, the realization finally dawning on him that there was no going back, no forgiveness to be had. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As he disappeared from view, a part of me felt lighter. It was finally over. I was free from the web of lies and betrayal Daniel had spun around us. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel and his mistress were crammed into a small apartment, their lives a constant battle, a far cry from the illusions he'd tried to sell to both of us. It was a fitting end, I thought, to a tale of deceit. As for me, I focused on my son, on rebuilding our lives without the shadow of Daniel hanging over us. We were moving on, stepping into a future that was uncertain, but ours to shape. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had survived the storm, and now, it was time to enjoy the calm,